I find it amazing how leaders shy away from taking responsibility. Like anytime bad things happen, which many times it does happen, I think it shows a lot of courage and a lot of sincerity when you come across as somebody who is willing to step up and say, okay, that is my responsibility and I take responsibility for that failure or for that decision, right? If you dodge the bullet and let it go to your team, you come across as a very weak leader, because sometimes you have all the right intentions and all the right effort put in, and yet you fail, right? In those scenarios, your leader has to be able to defend you. One thing that I do say as a caveat to that is that I talk about, imagine a person walking on a rope, right, between two mountains or something like that. So when you are working in a advanced technology product like ours, you tend to take risks, and there is a good chance that you will fall, right? And a leader's job is to kind of be that net underneath that rope, that if you fall will catch you. But one of my mentors taught me this, that while that is true, you should be thought about as a net that catches people when they make a mistake and they fall. But the laws of physics is such that if you fall in the same spot too many times, the net is going to break and you're going to fall through. What I ask my team is to make mistakes, take risks, move the needle, and if you fail, I'll protect you. But don't make the same mistake. Make new mistakes. And when you start behaving like that as a leader, first of all, it encourages all leaders, in your organization to behave the same way. But more importantly, I believe that you establish credence across the board, because there is a balancing act that you need to do when you're trying to upgrade the talent, right? As a leader, you should always thinking about upgrading your talent. And the way you do that is not always by letting people go and hiring better talent, but also to invest in the people that you already have, to improve them and understand where they're falling short, and giving them those criticisms and those constructive feedback so that they can improve. As leaders, you need to be somewhat aggressive with a few things. So, for example, if I break down the talent, let's call it the pyramid, into saying you have this 10% of your people or 20% of your top talent, that is not your problem, because they are kind of pulling the weight for your team, right? Most of the pulling is being done by them. Then you have this vast majority of people that are just meeting expectations, right? And then you have the bottom 20 or bottom 10, right, that are, on a recurring basis, they're falling short, right? And when you tolerate that for too long, multiple bad things happen. First, you're not sending the right message to the entire team, that you need to be present. If you're here, you need to be present. You need to be always constantly pushing yourselves and pushing our product, pushing our team to be better. And when I tolerate somebody who's not doing that, it kind of sends all the, why am I working harder than others, right? Secondly, those 20 people, they're thinking that there are people that are getting away with not even pulling their weight, and here I'm getting more and more shoved on me, right? And so in both directions, this is not the right thing. So what I advocate for is making sure that you give those people a chance, right? Those bottom performers, and make sure you have those hard conversation. But then you need to make those hard decisions at a certain point as well, to be able to manage those people out, so that you can get fresh talent, and especially in the areas where you're trying to grow. Maybe you don't. That middle 60-70% of the people that are neither at the top nor at the bottom, these are the people that actually make the most difference as to how you treat them, right? Because that's the vast majority of your capacity. Now, what I advocate for is, instead of leaving them there all the time and thinking that my most critical projects will always go to the top 20% because I just trust them very much, so I would rather overload them than to democratize some of those load across all of these people. That's the natural tendency. You know that this project success is critical to you and your product, so you don't, in some ways, trust this vast majority of people. When you do that, you are kind of compounding the problem. But what if you do the opposite? What if you actually give critical projects that you may or may not know if these people in this block can do it or not, but if you assign them, only then you will know for sure maybe those people are actually ready for a challenge, but they never get it, and they get this project and they step up, and all of a sudden your 20% became 30% of people that are going to actually make a difference in your product. Or by giving this, now you know that this person cannot step up to the challenge, and at that point you may have a very concrete discussion with these people saying, well, I gave you a chance, I gave you two chances, and you didn't really step up to the plate. So now I'm going to slowly bring you down to that bottom 12%, because obviously you're not going to move the needle for us, right? So without giving them those litmus tests in terms of giving them the critical projects, you will never know. So by not giving them, you are not doing yourself a favor or the people that are in that big block any favor. So these are some of the things that I do to make sure that we are constantly upgrading our talent. You want to be very careful about this, because if everybody comes into the office thinking about whether I'll have a job tomorrow or not, that's not the culture that I'm trying to create here. But you still need to create a culture of some accountability at the bottom, right? That says we will not tolerate anything and everything, right? So there is, at the end of the day, we are here for a business, we're not here for charity. We need to move the needle, and that's how I would approach it. I was asked, like, are you sort of a East Coast executive or a West Coast executive? And until that point, I had never been asked that question. I didn't even know what that meant, right? And I think that goes back to the heart of your question. There is a significant difference in how people manage here than how rest of the world manages. And I'm not saying they're all wrong. I'm just saying there is a distinct difference in the way people manage over here. People over here, I believe, truly believe in empowering the teams, okay? And in some ways, they want to manage less. In Silicon Valley, I think more than anywhere else, and I haven't worked anywhere else, so I can't really say that with a conviction. I believe that leaders don't have time for micromanaging, so they fundamentally want to have a self-organizing teams, and scaling a business is part of the DNA of Silicon Valley. Like if you look at the funding, like Series A, it's all about how do you scale the business, right? And if you want to scale the business, and if you want to micromanage everybody in your team, you're never going to scale the business. So I think in Silicon Valley, scaling your business, scaling your team, scaling technology, scaling processes, it's all about scaling. And in that way, when you are worried about scaling, your leadership style changes, because you don't want to do anything that does not scale. And micromanaging, obviously, something that doesn't scale, right? Again. If I look back, right, from how leadership used to be, I think leadership and management used to be the same at a certain point, right? But now more than ever, I think people realize that these are two different things, right? You do need to manage a few things, but you need to lead more than manage, right? So if I extrapolate from how leadership has evolved in the last 20 years, let's say, it's very easy for me to say that it could and it should evolve in the next 20 years as well. A lot of the technology that we have now is changing the way we work. Like we have video conference, we have all these phone conferences and stuff like that. So that's allowing us to work in a much more collaborative way, even though we are distributed, right? So I don't know what technology will bring in the next few years that might actually force us to change our leadership style as well. But I do think the leadership will evolve to the point where we want to get to a point where people are self-managing themselves and being, driven by their own purpose that's aligned with the corporation's purpose as well, as opposed to somebody breathing down your neck and saying, this is what you got to do, right? So I think leadership may change a lot more from top down to being much more democratic, but we haven't figured it out yet, in the sense that I have seen companies that do a lot more top down than, let's say, how I would like to see it happen. I've also seen the other extreme where it's kind of left alone to the teams, and it becomes an academic exercise to a large extent. So we need to be somewhere in the middle where there is significant oversight and an understanding of where we are going and how your results either align or not align, but leaving it completely, you know, unmanaged or not led, I don't think is the way to go also. Mm-hmm. So there is a fine balance there that needs to be there, because otherwise you might have a team that is very happy, and people might argue that, you know, team being happy results in successful business. I can point you to many business cases where team is very happy, but that did not result into successful business. So we need to somehow get that utopian stage where teams are happy, yet it is aligned with what the business needs, because ultimately, if the business is not successful, guess what? Team is not going to be around. Right? So. Being in the technology industry, we tend to have a little bit of bias for experienced people than freshers, right? So I don't have a whole lot of experience managing, you know, fresh grads, but whatever I have seen, you know, they don't want to be bossed around every time. They want to have the flexibilities, you know, of working the way they want to work. But what is surprising is that they actually want to know about purpose even more than some of the other people that have been there for a long time, because those guys are conditioned in some ways to take it as it is, and basically saying, I'm here to work, I'll just do whatever I need to do to make the company successful. I'm not going to challenge, or I'm not going to worry about what it's going to do to the big picture, right? I'm not saying everybody's like that, but I've seen not everybody from that generation worries about the purpose, right? Although they would like to have it, right? But they don't necessarily demand it. But I feel like millennials demand it. They want to know what I'm doing, how is it making a difference, right? And once you're able to tap into that energy, good things happen, right? Because as you can see, I mean, they can take anything and be obsessed with it, right? So if you can tap into that obsession for something that you need for your business, obviously it will move the needle for you much faster. Yeah. Whatever I have learned so far and wherever I have reached in my career, I think a lot of that has to do with the mentors that I've come across along the way, and there are many. But one thing that I want to mention here is that at a certain point, I had a mentor that was extremely supportive of me and extremely encouraging. And I used to go to work with the sole purpose of impressing him, right? Or getting that, you know, kudos from him, basically. That was the driver, right? And I excelled at my role, I think partly because of that, at that position. But then he moved on, and I found myself completely unprepared for that. Coming to work and figuring out, now what do I do? Now who do I impress, right? Don't just work for your boss, right? Because you may have a wonderful boss today, and you may have a challenging boss tomorrow. But more importantly, you have many stakeholders that you need to satisfy, and to get satisfaction from. You know, everybody walks into a job thinking to make a difference, right? And if you only tie it to one boss, then you are only satisfying one key constituents that you are here to serve. Your team members are a key constituent that you serve, so you work for them as well. You know, you should feel as much satisfaction as in removing their obstacles than as you would feel for helping your boss succeed. Similarly, you should feel as much satisfaction in helping a customer as you did to help your team or you're helping your boss, right? You should feel as much success or as much satisfaction helping your peer be successful So you have many stakeholders. So don't just align your interest to your boss, because in today's world, first of all, you don't have one boss. You have many different bosses, whether you realize it or not, right? So kind of putting all your eggs in one basket is not a good idea anyway. But that also limits your job satisfaction. If you tie your job satisfaction to all stakeholders, you tend to have much better balanced view of the world, and you tend to go home knowing that you have made a difference, because on every day you're not going to deal with one stakeholder, you're going to deal with many stakeholders, and if you have made a difference in every one of those stakeholders, or at least some of it, then you know that you have made a difference, right? I don't know if I